Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, along with my fair feathered friend, DBQ Hams. How you doing, DBQ?
Yes, only fair feathered. If it was bad news, I would not be here. Nope. Come rain or shine, we are stuck together. So,
Welcome aboard, everyone, to yet another episode of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast, Grown Up to Game. This is episode number 211. Game industry news deep dive for the 23rd of September 2021, and it is a barn burner tonight. Fortunately, there are only two of us on. I'm saying fortunate because if we had all four of us on to discuss the bevy of news, there were 20 announcements in the Nintendo Direct today.
yeah, there was quite a slew. I mean, hard to say announcements, I guess. There were 20 announcements. Not necessarily 20 new games, but yeah, there were lots of announcements.
Yeah.
So, I mean, should we dive right into that? Is that?
We may as well. Yes.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and lead off, since you are much more of a Nintendo expert than I am?
Well, I guess we probably should start in chronological order rather than like the Chris Pratt news that's setting the internet ablaze. So we have, and I guess I'm gonna let's hit him in waves, and then we'll stop and kind of catch our breath. How about that? So we get an announcement of Monster Hunter Rise expansion coming this next summer. Sunbreak. It's Monster Hunter expansions. That's good. Expect that. You had that with the Monster Hunter World. Then we get a little bit more of an update on the Mario Party series in terms of some of the boards. We get an update on Disco Elysium coming to Switch, which we knew was coming. Not quite sure when before, but now we have a date attached to that as well. We get more Age of Calamity Hyrule Warriors DLC with the Breath of the Wild cast. In this a group of announcements here, I think the Square Yoko Taro Voice of Cards Isle of Dragon Roars is probably the real announcement in this, the new game that a couple of months ago, Yoko Taro and another developer from Square were had a quick little video in terms of they were supposed to have some announcements for TGS, Tokyo Game Show, and Sakurai said that he didn't have anything or couldn't show anything yet for Final Fantasy 7 or 16, and Yoko Taro said, well, maybe I'll have something. And so I think this is his something. This is Yoko Taro is the kind of creative designer and executive producer behind the Nier series. And so it brings some of that storytelling, some of that kind of meta narrative aspects to this card game RPG. So, and then sticking on Square just a little bit, then we also get Chocobo GP, which feels like, at first I thought it was a remaster of the PlayStation Chocobo racing game, but it is right along in that same mind share of Chocobo in carts. So if we haven't had enough franchise mascots and carts yet, we are full on back to the early 2000s with having had Sonic Racer and Crash and Garfield and Nicktoons, and now we get Final Fantasy kart racers as well. So that was the first group. Left off there with a little bit of a tease for the final Smash Brother announcement, final DLC, having a separate announcement for that. And then we got an extended kind of pre-rendered trailer with a little bit of gameplay on the Kirby game that was leaked a little earlier in the day, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, which is not a side-scrolling Kirby, but a 3D platformer, more in the visual style, or at least the 3D aspect of Kirby 64. And so then that's the first group. Any thoughts here, Game Logic, in terms of surprises, pleased things to see?
Well, I definitely want to, and you may have to help me out. I was trying to get the social media out and check the live stream, so I may have missed a couple points that you went over.
Covered everything up until Kirby.
Okay, I'll see where that is in the agenda somewhere, I'm sure. Okay, through H. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about Kirby, and I was thinking about asking Swiss Guard, but he's not on tonight. Is it historically accurate that typically the Kirby game is representative of the end of that hardware generation?
I would say historically, but not recently, right? Like you have Kirby's Adventure. You had 3 Kirby games on SNES, so they kind of lived there a little bit. Kirby 64 toward the end there. But really, we had a Kirby, what was it, Star Allies, which was 2018. So it was relatively early in the Switch's life cycle. So yes, I mean, Kirby's sometimes do mark the end of a life cycle, but that has more recently not been the case.
Was that title a new title, or was that a Wii or Wii U port?
The 2018 one was a new title. Yep, it was 4-player side scroller, kind of in the vein of the traditional kind of Kirby's Adventure, but or Return to Dreamland on the Wii. But yeah, I mean, there nowadays, at least since the Wii, you've had multiple Kirby games throughout its life cycle, at least 2.
Okay. And what were your own thoughts about Disco Elysium? We've seen a small number of titles. I don't know. Maybe I would probably have to go back and actually look at the metrics on that. I want to say, though, that we're still in an era where we sometimes look askew at a explicit, mature title that arrives on the Switch because we still continue to think of it as like the family-friendly console. And Disco Elysium is a quite explicit title.
Sure. I mean, I guess I would agree, right? Like, I think there is still that mind share. I think that Bethesda has tried to break some of that with the simultaneous or limited delayed releases of both Dooms and Wolfensteins. I mean, you do get some of that. So, and not nearly as much. I think in some ways it feels more in line with not trying to carve out the mature game for this kid platform, but more in line of it's been a successful place for PC ports in the indie sphere. And so I think that that's probably more the challenge, I think, with Disco Elysium, and you've played it, is there's a lot of text in this. And how's that going to play out on a handheld?
Well, and I actually think that it'll play out well on a handheld. I mean, you're right. Disco Elysium, and look, I appreciate the art house, right, parameters and characteristics of Disco Elysium. It tends to not be a gamey game for much of its playtime. I actually think, though, on a handheld, you're sitting with it on a plane. Maybe we're getting back to that point where you're on a plane, but you're out and about. It's portable. You're in bed, visiting a relatives or something, and it's just something to kind of sit there and comfortably read through. So I actually think it'll play halfway decently, and it doesn't require a beast of 10 fans, with 64 gigabytes of RAM.
Right, I think that it should run just fine. Yeah, right, exactly. Right. Yep.
And your thoughts on Chocobo GP? So here we are. We are 4 years into the life cycle of the Nintendo Switch. Mario Kart 8 still appears on the monthly charts quite frequently as one of the top 10 sellers. You're now going to take much of the design aesthetic, or at least some similarities, of the Mario Kart property and mix it with Final Fantasy, which a lot of times you think of these dream team arrangements and you, again, look askew at them as, not uncertain that they will actually perform. But then we had Mario and the Rabbids, and that turned out quite well.
Yeah, I mean, and originally when the first Chocobo Racing hit on PlayStation, it was a solid kart racer. I mean, so kart racers can be done well. They've got plenty of characters. Even showing some of the attacks or the items that you would pick up are in line with the spells within the Final Fantasy series. So I could see for fans of Final Fantasy, or maybe grown-up fans of Final Fantasy, that this is a nice kind of bridge family game. I think of a game I really enjoyed back on the DS was, what was it, Chocobo Battle? But it was it was more or less a card battling game, but it had kind of these chibi kind of cartoony-esque Final Fantasy characters, and it was a solid card battling RPG. So Square's done it before, and it seems very possible to do it again. And the fact that, like you said, if Mario Kart continues to dominate sales, there's a market out there for people that have Mario Kart, all 30 some million of them that are Switch owners, that may be looking for something still in that genre that is accessible, and this might hit that spot.
And you're absolutely right. It's a good time for a refresh of that type of game on the Switch. So I will go ahead and pick up the next 8 or so, if that's all right with you. Let's see. So this is so there are quite a number of weird ones in here, and unfortunately, we are charging headlong into this outbrief tonight. Hot on the heels of the Direct, which was just what two hours ago it ended, and so haven't had a ton of time to really surface some of the more interesting ones. This is the first one I think we've got KOTOR coming to the Switch now. As far as I can tell, in particular looking at this screenshot, this appears to be a port of the original. This is not then the remake that was just recently announced, correct?
Correct. That's the way I look at it as well. I mean, granted, the remake that's coming for PlayStation and PC is done by the port house that has done all the other Star Wars games, Republic Commando, Jedi Outcast. So it makes sense that they did this, and now they're working on doing KOTOR kind of with not just with a fresh coat of paint, but with an updated system and things like that. So I think it also speaks to the fact that there were some questions when the PlayStation announcement came, and whether that's going to be just a remaster or if it's going to be a full-on remake. And the fact that they're coming out with this on Switch and other consoles means that this is our remaster. The PC one is going to be a remake, or the PlayStation 5 one is going to be a remake.
Right. Yep. That's the way I have been reading the tea leaves as well. The next announcement, Dying Light 2 hits the cloud, and I want to say that I wish Towmaster was on, because I think he's the expert on this series. I always get confused between this and there's like one other title that constantly run together in my memory. I can't remember what it is, but a cloud-enabled version of Dying Light 2 Stay Human is coming to the Nintendo Switch. I see no date on this one. Was anyone announced, or was there a window?
I think we get something this fall. Yes, okay. Dying Light 1 and 2, right?
Okay. So this is not... What is the game that was just recently announced as being delayed into early 2022, like January of 2022? It's an incredibly open-ended question.
State of Decay 2?
Yes,
no, that's...
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, that is the one that I constantly confuse those two franchises, because I feel like those are the two that are constantly being delayed and in some type of purgatory that never get out on time. But it may be that the headline grabbing news of State of Decay constantly keeps this game from popping to prominence in my mind. Next announcement, Triangle Strategy is coming in 2022. Project Triangle Strategy has a final title. It is now Triangle Strategy. It has a release date of March of 2022. So it pops into the big dog pile of games that are piling up in February and March, which I have been on record as saying the last time that I recall that happening was the year Horizon Zero Dawn came out and Resident Evil came out, and out of all the games that piled up into that release window, those were the only two games that actually made it. Everything else was delayed until early summer, and the vast majority were delayed until the next holiday season. So, but given that this does not appear to be a hugely complex game, it should remain on track. Has this one? I feel like this is like a Swiss Guard kind of game. Maybe it seems to be in the JRPG vein.
The Triangle Strategy, yes. Yeah. I mean, it has that kind of Octopath Traveler. It had the demo that came out earlier in the spring. they said they took feedback from it, and it was similar to what that team did with Octopath Traveler and with Bravely Default, is where they put a demo out on systems. I mean, in terms of a demo that highlighted the systems of the game and allowed them to get some feedback on that, some balancing issues, and take that into account.
Indeed. Then we have the big one, Metroid Dread, for which there is a new trailer. I have not had a chance to watch this trailer. Did you watch it, or did you see any?
Yeah, I watched it. I mean, looks like Metroid. I mean, they get a little bit of a story. I mean, I shouldn't be so dismissive, right? I mean, I think at this point, we have a sense of what Metroid looks like. It had more of those vertical and horizontal caverns. You get a little bit of the Chozo statues and story around the mythology around Chozos. So, yeah, I mean, it served to remind people and potentially get people excited about it. But I would think, for the most part, people that are excited about Metroid Dread have a sense of what they're getting.
Yeah, and this is kind of falls in line with a recent thing that I posted on my blog, which is how many times can a game show up at E3 or any type of show or presentation before people just start to get kind of fatigue. You know, like you said, this is a game that we know what's coming. There's not any surprises to be revealed. Walking up to the release window, and now it's just time to just put the game out. And I guess this trailer serves the purpose, as you mentioned, of kind of keeping the skids greased. But I don't know that that was really necessary. But given, I mean, the one thing I'll say about this Nintendo Direct is typically these things fall on very dulled ears for me. I'm like, I can't remember. I think the last time that I was excited about a Nintendo Direct was maybe the actual launch of the Switch, and the January conference of 2017, and then the one in March, right when the Switch actually released. Maybe one more beyond that, but really, I've just never been overjoyed. I think the Smash Brothers one I was excited about.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of what was here, there weren't a lot of surprise. I mean, I think that it gives you some content. It gives you some things to show that there's still things in the pipeline. You get a little bit of first party stuff, but I think what it also does is remind people, as the Switch continues to sell gangbusters, that there's a plethora of things in the pipeline. Maybe not some big third party titles coming out on the other two consoles, but what it does show is that there's a range of genres coming to Switch. And I think potentially some of the things that are coming in this next wave of announcements here are maybe a little more, not necessarily surprising, but things that were either rumored or hoped for. So, and that goes for the expansion pack of Nintendo Online, which then gives you Nintendo 64 games and surprise Sega Genesis games. And there was the rumor, the leaked patent a couple of weeks ago about a new Nintendo controller, and the rumors around that and the language around it made it seem like it was similar to an N64 controller, which started people wondering about if we would get Nintendo 64 games. The Sega Genesis one feels like it was a little kept under wraps, or maybe not. There were enough other Sega Genesis controller patents out there that it never popped up. But having both of those, and I say this snarkily, but I also already have looked on the Nintendo website to see if I could purchase one. But of course, they're going to sell you controllers for that are Wi-Fi controllers or Bluetooth controllers for both the Nintendo 64 design and a Sega Genesis controller. So those are not up yet, just in case you were wondering. I was not successful in ordering them yet, but yes, as much as in some ways, like this is my grumpy old man gamer moment, right? Like, of all the things announced at this was the thing that was like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's more games that I'm going to continue my Switch Online aspect, of having that subscription. And so now having more stuff to play, great. And I don't have to hook up my Genesis Mini to play some of these games.
Right.
One of the other Go ahead.
Yeah, this I don't know if well, I'll probably wait till we roll through all of them. I think I've gone through them quickly before, but I don't have all of them memorized as to everything that was out. But this is definitely one of, I would say, the top three things that actually excited me. I grew up as a Sega kid. I owned, I think I owned every single Sega console. So the Master System, the Genesis, the Saturn, and the Dreamcast. And for this to come to Nintendo Online again, a service that I maintain, but I don't get super super excited about. I think the best thing about it is, quite honestly, when my kids come down here to play the Switch, that is a thing that they will actually go and look at, and I feel bad because they're like, hey, how do I play this? I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. You're on your own, kid. So I'm super excited though about the potential of. I mean, to think that things like Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure or Vector Man could show up on this service, or Einhinder, those things that are like solidly written, etched in my brain and memories from my love of the Genesis. Pretty excited.
Yeah,
and this was, to me at least, was super unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, I am as well, and I have a Genesis Mini. And also I've purchased the Genesis Classics collection both on Switch, PlayStation 3. I mean, there's a lot of good Genesis games out there that have a lot of legacy to them.
Right,
so,
and should present no problem, at least from a hardware perspective, for them to even bring the 32X titles in. Now, how that code exists, right? It's hard for me to. I would have to give a little deeper thought to how I might think that code exists and how it was constructed in order to take advantage of that peripheral. So that code could, that it's feasible that those programs could be something that just can't be recompiled.
That would be really interesting, in part because outside of emulation, I don't know that there's been any official releases of the 32X add-on. But yes, I mean, getting what was it, Sega Rally and Star Wars would be pretty fun.
Yeah, and those would be kind of the only two that you would need. I think there were only I'm sure there were more, but at least in the United States, I think there were only 4 or 5 32X games.
Yes,
really, anyway.
I was working in retail at the time, and I do remember the sales booklet that came out with all 4 of those games. Yes,
right. And actually, I think Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure was another one. I think you could get a regular 16-bit version of that. I think you could get a 32X version, and I want to say they did a Sega CD version also, but I could be wrong. There was one game that there was actually 3 complete formats. Right? That might have been Echo the Dolphin, but that would not be a 32X game that I would need.
So let's keep on the idea of old games coming back. It was rumored and rated over in Australia. The Castlevania Advanced Collection is now out. It's actually out now for not only Switch, but for PC, PlayStation, iOS, and Android as well. Coming in at about $20. It has all 3 of the GBAs, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and Area of Sorrow. It also has Dracula X, along with the traditional kind of emulation pieces here with save states and rewind functionality. It has encyclopedia, music collections, things like that, art galleries. For $20, if you've had some fond memories of those Castlevanias or enjoyed Bloodstained and you want something more in that Ikarashi type of Castlevania, then this certainly fits that. Another remaster is ActRaiser Renaissance, which is...
So I just want to back up one.
Please do.
Did I talk about Sega so much that you deliberately skipped over Shadowrun?
No, I was coming back to it.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead. Talk about... No, I did not deliberately skip it. Right, it is. Yes, go ahead. Shadowrun Trilogy. Again, another classic game series coming to Switch. I didn't catch a date on that.
So I didn't either. So I lose the history on this a little bit. I remember the Shadowrun RPG that was on Genesis. So it's a little strange to me. I'm like, well, why didn't they just put this in the Genesis expansion pack? What is so different about it? Obviously, that they're packaging it. I don't. I knew that, and then I know that there was one RPG on the Nintendo, on the Super NES, I want to say, that preceded it. Those are the only two that I know of, so I don't know what the third game is.
So I feel like these are the PC ones. This is Shadowrun Returns, Shadowrun Dragonfall.
Okay, that would
No,
be excellent.
Shadowrun Returns. I'm looking at it right now. Shadowrun Dragonfall, Shadowrun Hong Kong, which are all Paradox games, which kind of put them in that PC mindset. But yes,
Yeah.
there were Shadowrun games on 16-bit systems as well.
No, that's great. That's actually better than I had expected or was anticipated, so I am all for that as well. At least we are not getting the Shadowrun multiplayer FPS that was on the Xbox 360.
Yes, fair enough. And this is coming 2022. So another game that is out today is ActRaiser Renaissance, which is ActRaiser was a early Super Nintendo game. It is in its 30th year right now, and so it's a nice remaster with original music, redone graphic style. Or it seems like redone graphics. I mean, tries to mimic some of those same graphic styles, but with a remastered touch to it. It is also on PC and no, PC and PlayStation. So no Xbox on this one. I looked it up. No Xbox on this one, but those three other platforms.
And given that this is a JRPG, right?
Not really. I mean, this is ActRaiser's claim to fame, is that it was a combination city builder and side-scrolling RPG. I mean, more of a side-scrolling platformer with a sword. You had a little bit of RPG elements, but so you had levels that were kind of 16-bit action platformer, and then you had a town building aspect where you were kind of controlling building up your village, defending it from enemies. So it was kind of in that same vein when SimCity was popular. And it had a kind of and that's where it made its mark, is that it had that kind of balance. In ActRaiser 2 for the Super Nintendo, it got rid of the city building and stayed just a side-scrolling action platformer and never really found the same audience.
So if you had to pick, would you call this an Eastern design game or a Western design game?
I would say this is definitely an Eastern design game. This is not a Western RPG.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, so the not coming to Xbox doesn't surprise me because I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, this was originally, it was an Enix game. So
okay. Oh wow.
Yep. Yes, back before it was Square Enix. Yes.
So, strange. So much history in this Nintendo Direct. Like so many callbacks to legacy gaming and fond memories and nostalgia. And I mean, I know that Nintendo mascot oriented games are kind of all around that, but this is like, I feel like there's a subcurrent theme of like reaching back into like all the greatness of gaming and bringing those things into the current generation theme, like running underneath the surface of this Direct.
I think that's a solid kind of broad perspective on it, right? Like, and in some ways it makes a lot of market sense as well, is that if this console is sold as well as it has, it's in a wide variety of homes. Parents might have bought it for kids, but now if they're seeing that there's franchises and names that those parents are familiar with, that may kind of expand that audience as well.
And I know that, we constantly harp the theme that, they aren't competing against PlayStation or Xbox, but like such an excellent way to neuter their strategy, right? I mean, it's not a direct head-to-head competition, but if you think of a way, and we've been talking about this, right? How do you make the Nintendo Switch relevant, right? Or worst case, if you've got gamers who are going to pick a PlayStation or an Xbox as their primary, how do you ensure, particularly with the Xbox Series S on the market at $299, you're now going to a SKU that's $50 more expensive. How do you ensure relevancy of that console and make sure that it's, if it's not the primary pick, you doggone sure, figure out a way to make doggone sure it's the secondary pick. And like, this is a way, like, putting games on, like you said, like getting games on here that call out to gamer nostalgia, putting it on and put it and then concurrently, right? If you can put a 1-2 blow to that, a 1-2 punch, get those games only on Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, and it goes back. I mean, I think this is the strength of the portability aspect of that. Like, it's great to have a 4K system that's running some really high end stuff, and it's nice to pick up a portable and have that option when the TV or that screen is being used by something else.
Well, that's a great analysis to go back to Disco Elysium too, right? Like, even though I was the one who brought up that question, I constantly will bring up like, why, like, do I need my RTX 2070 to like run this thing, or like, why would I buy that game like on a PC or even on a PlayStation 5 or Xbox if they're bringing that much power? Again, perfectly suited to the Nintendo Switch, and like I said, curled up with the Nintendo Switch, in the passenger seat or on an airplane, right? Is an excellent way to kind of play that game.
Keep on moving through.
I can go ahead and roll through a few of these because I see some exciting ones again coming up for me. This is not one of them though, Deltarune. So you did such an excellent job briefing ActRaiser. Can you talk through the history of Deltarune at all?
Sure. So Deltarune is a Toby Fox. This is the follow up to Undertale. So he's been releasing it kind of in chapters. The full game is not going to be out for a while yet. Deltarune 1 came out last week on PC. Deltarune 2 came out. They're both free. At least they are on PC. And now they're both available on Switch as well.
Okay, next announcement was Splatoon 3, which I guess has been announced before, but this is a new trailer that is out. Again, this is a title that keeps me excited, does keep me excited about having the Nintendo Switch. They've been getting more and more multiplayer titles to the console, but I just don't feel like any of those, as much as I harp about like third-party games, and that's what excites me coming to the Nintendo Switch, I don't feel any of them do a particularly as great a job in the competitive multiplayer space as Nintendo's own native properties do. And Splatoon is definitely at the top of those. So it's still just a release window of 2022. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, and Splatoon, no, I think they're targeting 2022. I mean, Splatoon 2 came out in June.
In the summer.
Same thing with the original Splatoon, so it makes sense that they're going to hit that window.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a multiplayer competitive game that's in the vein of, I'm forgetting the name of it now. What is the EA dodgeball game that we just played?
Knockout City.
Yeah, so I feel like it's kind of akin to that, and I think that'll play well coming out in the summer. This one, yeah, it's interesting. A Mario movie is coming with Chris Pratt. I always get his last name mixed up with Oliver Platt, who is more prominent in my mind than Christopher Pratt. He will be playing Mario. That movie comes out in December of 2022. I cannot remember if that's before or after the next Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. No, yeah.
Chris Pratt tries to stay busy, so that's my only reason why I was questioning it. Great, okay. Nintendo doesn't have a particularly... Well, I was going to say, the Pokemon movie was actually halfway decent, wasn't it?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Detective Pikachu. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think they got a lot of talent here. You have the woman from Queen's Gambit playing Peach. You get Charlie Day as Luigi. Keegan Michael Key playing Toad. Jack Black as Bowser. Fred Armisen is in there playing Cranky Kong. Seth Rogen is playing Donkey Kong. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be pretty to look at because it's fun. It's filmation. It's Funimation. I am really curious on how this cast plays, but it's a holiday kids movie. I'm just going to let it be a holiday kids movie and not stress out about it too much.
Sure. With that much talent around it, you have kind of the same formula as you had for the Wreck-It Ralph movies, which played really well and were great movies to take the kids to. So maybe I shouldn't be as down on it as I am just because it's a video game property.
We'll let the rest of the internet be down on it. That's okay.
Right. Now, here's the next one that excites me. Bayonetta is back, and we got Bayonetta 3. I want to say finally announced. I mean, it's been rumored, but I think this is the first real solid confirmation we've had of it. Official.
I mean, it's been announced since 2017. This is the first time they've put a date on it of 2022. So, yes.
So we get a new gameplay trailer and see some changes in her looks. I don't know, and I wonder if this. So I think the last bit of Bayonetta news that we heard about a couple of weeks before this was that the voice actress who has portrayed Bayonetta in 1 and 2 was not coming back for 3, and so the character model looks slightly different facially than she did in the first 2, and I wonder if that's because they're making it look more similar to the voice actress. So there's that. Still just a window, right, of 2022.
Yes.
Nothing tighter than that. And in this time of the pandemic and chip shortages, that may be all that we get. And those windows may not entirely be due to development. Normally, we associate the uncertainty because people just don't know what's going to go on in the development pipeline. I think Nintendo's playing it very smart. I think they're making very deliberate choices about when titles come out and how they're spread out. I don't know what they're going to do about hardware. I love this. I mean, I like the Switch as a hardware platform, but and we've talked extensively about do we really need new hardware? What would you put on it? But we're starting to enter some timelines where you really have to be concerned about the life cycle of the Switch and just how long do you keep it going. I don't believe that that's a platform that has the legs of an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, which they were able to keep on the market for 7 years, right? I don't feel like that's a 7-year platform. So we're in year 4 going into year 5, you feel like the other shoe's got to be dropping soon. So
yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be. I'm really curious to see what supply looks like for their OLED model and what that does. I still don't know that that's enough of a refresh to move the needle in terms of extending that life cycle, but we will see. I mean, Nintendo definitely has a history of that iteration and being able to keep things. I mean, I think in some ways, whatever comes next still makes sense to have the Switch title in it somewhere so that it is, the backwards compatibility of it. You don't sell this many consoles without trying to keep that kind of mind share and market share.
Agreed. And so now that we've had a time of happiness for the first 3/4 or so of the show, it's time to bring it back down with Towmaster's favorite, the legal brief. So lots of legal news and action actually has gone on this last couple weeks. And I don't know why it is that whenever it seems like all the legal stuff is popping is like the weeks that Tao is not on the show. So I don't know why. So unfortunately, a tale of hard rocks and hard knocks. Former Bungie composer Marty O'Donnell, we get the story from IGN, was declared in contempt of court for utilizing what seems to be claimed to be intellectual property owned by Bungie, which he was supposed to have gotten rid of, either given up or deleted. I have to say, I'm not really super pleased about all the determinations that have come out of this arbitration. But apparently, in the last round of legal battles that O'Donnell had with Bungie, he was supposed to have 2000. I guess this was a 2015 lawsuit. He was supposed to have given up any digital material that he had that related to the intellectual property that he would have created while he was at Bungie, which I guess would have included pieces for Halo, although this isn't really mentioned. That's not really mentioned a ton in this article, as well as content for Destiny 1. And I think he got started on Destiny 2 before he was let go.
No, he was let go. He was let go shortly before Destiny 1 launched.
Okay.
because he developed Music of the Spheres for it. Some of his music ended up in the game, some of it didn't. The troubled history of Destiny is well documented, but Marty O'Donnell's score in there is part of that, and so it was definitely a legal battle. Music of the Spheres went up online. I have a copy of it because when it came up, it was a surprise to the Destiny community, and there was a mad dash to download copies of it because it was a shock that it was even there. The fact that everybody kind of knew it existed. Nobody necessarily knew that it was supposed to be sealed under the lawsuit that Marty O'Donnell agreed to in terms of the settlement. But that's where this news pops back up as yes, if that settlement meant that he was not supposed to share any of the music and it was all supposed to be sealed, it does seem pretty hard to justify that he didn't do that. Or someone someone related, connected to him in some way that had access to those files did not do that. So
this is part of my problem with the way this briefs. And again, I'm not a legal expert, right? So I'm just rendering my opinion. But so musicians, that having been one of the branches of life that I was going to go down had I not made another choice, but I was on my way to college on a music scholarship. Musicians, particularly composers, toy with pieces and riffs of music all the time that never become full-blown pieces. Like, you make a little ditty, right? And oftentimes a song winds up being a composition. It's just like a sketchbook, right? Like, you write down concepts of a sketchbook. Like, you look at any of the sketchbooks of like the Star Wars artists, right? Things that they sketched eventually become full-blown ideas, or are the foundation.
Sure, right. There's riffs, there's bars, there's melodies in there that get reused or reincorporated in different ways. Yes, very much so.
And this article reads as such. It says the foundation of the score, Music of the Sphere. So, and again, you're probably more of an expert on the music. So these are not pieces that are directly incorporated into Destiny, correct? Or is it a mishmash?
So, I mean, I think it is Music of the Spheres. The lore around it and the stories around it pretty much is that they were completed pieces, but not, the music that was put up in 2019 was more or less a full soundtrack. It was not just like, 30-second bars of pieces of music. They were completed pieces. They were mixed. They were layered. So this was, I don't know if it wasn't used because of the legal separation or if it wasn't used because of other issues, but a lot of it, by the time it came online, it was completed. I don't know that there was any work done to it afterward. I think that's part of where this challenge potentially comes from, is to what degree was it completed while he was at Bungie, and how much of it was he took some of these ideas and finished them out and then posted it.
So this is the slippery slope of being a creative, and whatever agreement you sign at a company. As an engineer, every company that I go to basically says, hey, anything that you work on company time while you're an employee here, right, is our property. And so, and I'm conscious of this, right? If I come back home and I diddle like a little notion of a conceptual architecture on an iPad outside of work hours, right? Is that the property of the company that I work for, or is that mine? Right, that's a thing that has to be considered, right, in how you communicate and convey things like that. Double so for creatives in this vein. So the way this reads and the way it makes me think about it is it makes me think it makes me perceive these as things that he did not deliver as fully incorporated and orchestrated pieces to Bungie. But regardless, I mean, the fact of the matter is that they assert control over it. They indicate and claim that it was part of the decision that was arbitrated earlier. The judge appears to agree with that as well. The other thing that I though don't like about this is that people bought this stuff, right? And the order has been that O'Donnell has to post a message that tells everybody to delete it and destroy it. And I'm like,
nobody bought it. It was not for sale. It was It was Bandcamp. It was
Okay.
grab it if you can type of thing. Listen to it. Yeah.
So on Bandcamp, are you not? Aren't there? Is it? I want to say, is it kind of like their Patreon mechanism to it, where you can contribute if you so choose?
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think I got it off of SoundCloud when I pulled it down, and I know that other than having to sign up for an account, there was not any kickback or transaction. It was shared files.
Right. So maybe that makes the sting a little less, that you could ask somebody. That still just feels very invasive, right? That the court ruling is going to be that anybody who pulled this down, right, who is not to blame in any way, right, for doing so, right, has to comply with some court order that they weren't even a part of. It just, I don't know. It feels scuzzy. So that appears to be the injunction. From what I've seen from O'Donnell's like online postings and stuff, this is and I don't know if he's impoverished or really hurting, but he appears to be a person who is not maybe doing that well. Is faced with continuing to increase legal bills that he is responsible for. And has moved to a point in life where he's not like hired on as a composing professional for any like studio company or anything, but is just trying to sell little pieces of things that he owns. Now, I guess he did work on one other game after this a PSVR game called Gollum, which just it's a PSVR game, so I mean, there's only so many total sales that were even feasible.
True. I know of the game, and I was interested in following the game because of his involvement. It had some other creatives attached to it as well. Marty O'Donnell is currently at Highwire and is working on 6 Days in Fallujah as well. So he's employed, but yes, having to pay $100,000 in reparations is a slap on anybody's pocketbook.
Yeah, and who knows even if has the Fallujah game even come out yet, or it was walked back from being released too, wasn't it?
It was delayed, definitely.
Okay. So next up in the legal brief, I think you were going to talk about this one, Apple having to allow other forms of in-app purchases.
Yes. So in the wonderful long story of Apple and Epic and Apple, basically, they both lose. That Epic loses in the short run, that they violated the agreement, which they knew about. Apple loses in the long run because they now need to offer alternative payment methods on Apple, so that by December 9th, that they must allow alternative payments, not just through the App Store, which is what Epic was doing that got them into this lawsuit in the first place. But what it does is it opens the door not only for Epic in the future, but also for a lot of other developers as well. So after all the other news and kind of headlines and inner workings that we learned about through the depositions and the legal briefings in terms of PlayStation's percentage that they demand if they're doing crossplay, the aspects of how much Epic has paid out to developers to have their free games on the Epic Store, we're left with a decision that, it's hard to say that this is not an appropriate decision. That all in all, Epic knew what they were doing. They fully admitted that they were forcing the hand of Apple. I think that, they're taking a short-term loss in terms of long-term busting open the store. And in the long run, that it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening for Apple and what this means for their and for developers. On Epic's end, they have to pay 30% of the revenue collected through the system through Apple, which comes out to about $3.5 million, and which is, if you look at how much they've paid for some of their free games on the store, that this is very they may have lost the ruling, but this is not much of an impact within Epic's bottom line.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure this is in the couch cushions in Epic's lobby.
yeah.
So as you mentioned, right? The thing that was kind of great about this case for us was like all the inside mojo that dripped and dropped out of the legal findings. That was actually pretty awesome because it answered tons of questions and suspicions and speculations that we'd been making about some of the inner workings of the market, that we found out were true, and that some of the behaviors of some of the companies were exactly as we thought they would be. Right, that there were notions of Google, and even though it probably never moved to anybody taking it to like an actual board meeting to talk about with executives, the fact of the matter that there's a crevice, there's a seam of culture at Google that is such that when encountering a problem, an impediment, an obstacle, that one of the hand wavy, frivolous options that's considered is, oh, we just buy them. That's exactly kind of what you would expect at a company, at a corporation that wields that much leverage in the market. One of the things I want to mention on this is, I'm not absolutely certain, but this ruling and what's permitted. So this ruling permits devs to put messages or something in an app that tells people that you don't have to do the in-app purchase in the app, that you can go elsewhere and procure the service. But as far as I read it doesn't allow. I think what people have been arguing for is an actual like button in the app that causes you to be careened off to a different back end, right? And so you don't exit the app.
Right. So there's a link in there that would bring you to a different storefront. Yeah.
Yeah. Or no, I think what people actually want is for it to actually be processed in the app. So for instance, if there were a Samsung app, or let's say there's a Google app. Let's say, so for instance, you can get Google Calendar, right? Let's say Google Calendar offered a lifetime subscription to extensions, right? That you would hit that button and it would be transparent to you whether you were going through Apple and giving them 30% or being sent to the back end of Google Pay and having all of that money go to Google. I think that's the ultimate realization that people want. And so this is a half step. It's a thing that makes people aware, but doesn't necessarily break the ties that bind that would cause you to go for convenience more so than, right? Like on Amazon, you can go outside the app. I have to do this all the stinking time, and it drives me nuts. If I want to purchase, so typical scenarios, use cases, Friday or Saturday, the kids ask me, "Hey, we want to watch whatever new like movie on Amazon, right?" So I want to purchase the movie. When I'm using an Android phone as my daily driver, I just go to my phone and buy the movie, right? If I'm on my iPhone as a daily driver, I got to come down here to the basement, right? Log on to some other device or onto a computer and purchase the movie that way because I can't do it on my blasted iPhone. So, yeah. So not the wall banger that was probably desired, but it's a bit of a scooch. So, and as is mentioned in this article, it's similar to the same things Apple had already been legally required to do in Europe and some other places. But at least a potential end to this ongoing war. Like, I was kind of glad to see Apple and Samsung working out their beef, but I was also exhausted by that legal battle and was glad when it finally ended. This might be another one that you want to jump in on a little bit. The SEC is now investigating Activision.
Sure,
Blizzard.
the fun times for Activision Blizzard do not stop. So yes, now the SEC is investigating Activision Blizzard. So again, last month and a half ago at this point, state of California filed a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. Number of issues there in terms of threatening unsafe workplace, unequal pay for minorities and women, spooled out into a number of other issues, including kind of the sexual misogynistic culture in Blizzard. At first, you had the executives kind of uh, rallying the wagons and saying this is not right, and they dropped this on us, and it is. And then you had Bobby Kotick a couple days later say, "Yeah, we need to work on some things," and acknowledge that a little bit more. You had a number of high-profile exits from Activision Blizzard over the last month, both in terms of creatives. Kind of on their own looking for someplace else, and people who were encouraged probably to leave. That includes the Overwatch character of McCree, his namesake, Jesse McCree, longtime Blizzard developer who was part of this misogynistic, harassing culture, according to allegations. You also had some follow-up allegations where the state of California was suggesting that Activision Blizzard was actively shredding documents. And so now you have the SEC involved. They are have requested a variety of documents, including communications from CAO, from Bobby Kotick, from other executives as well. They want to see the separation agreements between employees who have left this year, personnel files for some of the high-profile people who are being accused as part of this culture, and board minutes going back 2 years. So this now has gone from a state of California issue and is growing into a federal issue. Along the same heels of this announcement with the SEC, you also get another Blizzard lead producer, executive producer on Overwatch, Chaco Sony, who departed. He's been in the, he was executive producer in the original Overwatch and has been an executive producer on Overwatch 2. That there is some good spin here in terms of, but why he's leaving and is moving on, and that as executive producer, Overwatch 2 is in its final stages, and he's very thankful for his opportunities at the company. This announcement comes earlier this week, and his last day is the 24th. So relatively quickly. And again, one more high-profile person leaving from the Blizzard side of the Activision Blizzard. And strangely, a lot of the cultural pieces, the challenging pieces, the harassment aspects, the workplace environment pieces seem very centered around Blizzard and not as much around Activision. And it's, we haven't heard anything about Activision's multiple Call of Duty studios in terms of Treyarch, Sledgehammer, Raven. We're not hearing things around them. That doesn't mean that this company culture has not been, there are not other issues. But it will be interesting. Again, this legal battle is not over. We finished one long legal battle with Epic and Apple. Epic and Apple. There we go. And we are heading into another long one here with the state of everybody and Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, so part of what I was interested in this whole thing is I was like, why is the SEC getting involved? And the matter is, I think as you talked about, is whether or not Activision failed to let investors know that this type of thing was pending, right? Because clearly it was going on inside the halls of Activision before we found out about it, right? And should investors have been informed so that they could have made decisions to do things like say, maybe I'm going to divest of my Activision stock this month, right? And maybe I'm going to put that money elsewhere. The DFEH, I think it's safe to say that they probably wouldn't, as we mentioned when this lawsuit first broke, right? Like, DFEH isn't going to break out a lawsuit, right, that they think they're going to lose, right? That they don't have
right? Like,
the smoking
they're
gun
not going to
for.
file something unless there's enough there.
Right. And so for
to take action on it. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
and so for them to expand the lawsuit about shredding documents, like we're now thoroughly in the realm of Enron and what is the and Thera? I can't remember what it's called, but the
Yeah, it's a mess, right? And
yeah,
then we also get the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, has been conducting investigations around Activision as well, with gender-based harassment since 2020. So one more agency conducting investigations. And so, like you said, you now have the opportunity aspect, or the equal employment aspect. You have the DFEH in terms of shredding documents. You have the investor aspects with the SEC. It's coming from all fronts, right? There are some. If there are not some systemic issues, there's enough of a paper trail that gives agencies in these realms enough of a sense that they have some legal action that is winnable, or at least actionable.
right. So there's definitely blood in the water. Everybody's definitely looking to get their piece. I was kind of quickly googling around. I don't know. I don't think that I would have reason to believe that for a corporation the size of Activision Blizzard, that something like this would run them out of business, right? Um, they're going to get issued some kind of fine. They will probably be a settlement. Um, and the best case scenario maybe is that some of the employees who have been maligned by all this will get large settlements that will definitely compensate for any loss, right, and probably well exceed what they lost out on from having to walk away from Activision Blizzard. So, but the unfortunate thing is, 5 years from now, I mean, the question is really, is this really going to change the culture? Is this really going to change the industry? They're obviously not the only massive gaming corporation that has this kind of a problem, and the question will be, will other large corporations, will other large third party publishers, like clean up their act before they find themselves right in similar waters?
Right. I think that is the potential of the ripple effects of this, is that it does encourage that people see the number of different legal venues and actions that are being taken here, and gives them a reason to do a hard look at their corporate cultures and their workplace environments, and to make some changes if they need them, strengthen areas where they're successful in, and get those things documented, so that as investigation expands into an industry, which often happens in other industries, when one giant of an industry, or one significant player in the market share, gets investigated for whether it's you know accounting practices or other things, that then they end up turning that same lens to their peers. And so it makes sense that this is not over for the industry either. And I think in some ways, that this people that have been trying to raise awareness about this, and highlight this, it is a benefit that now it's becoming more formalized, and not just kind of in a social media gaming press aspect, that there's more formal channels where these things are being aired out and hopefully addressed.
Yeah. So, and normally HR departments fall under, they may fall under a COO or a chief of corporate operations or something like that. But you would imagine that any C-level officer that had any of this functionality within their bailiwick would be going, that is not happening to me, right? It would be having an all hands meeting with all of their employees saying, here's what you're going to start doing right now, right? Because we don't want to be the next one that they're coming after. So interesting. We'll see how it goes. I feel like there was a big upswell of support and heat behind this on making change when this story initially broke. I don't feel like social cultural there's as much of a social cultural bow wave behind this now. I feel like it's all legal and financial, which is good that somebody's going to get their comeuppance, right? If this turns out to be the case, but I feel like there's been a loss of momentum of like what the employees were trying to get done, or what the industry was trying to get done. And I know that there are other efforts afoot, right? That people people have stood up hotlines so that there's places for people to come in, and some of those have been kind of small successes. But I don't the bow wave that felt like there was going to be something that moved the needle. I feel like has lost a little bit of heat behind it.
Yeah, you certainly don't have the, when this all broke, you had the walkouts, you had the daytime strikes, you had a number of support statements from other studios. I mean, it is typical in these types of things that you're going to see that in waves, that as new news comes out, or as lawsuits, as it comes to a deposition time, or any type of more formal proceedings, you probably get another wave of awareness. And similar to what we had in the Apple and Epic one, that there were dips and valleys in the news cycle on that as well. So hopefully that the change momentum that was started doesn't just fizzle out, and it does provide a reason for people. I shouldn't say people, right? Because the people on the ground, which is often the case, the people on the ground who are being affected by this are very much, this is still in their mind share, and this is still it is the idea of keeping this within the administrative, the executive levels, and how to make this change more structural rather than just reactionary.
But the thing that bugs me is we've had so across the last 4 years, right? I want to say, and I'm realizing now that many times things that I remember historically actually took place further back in history than I think that they did. So maybe it's more than 4 years, but I'll just say 4 years.
It happens when you get old. That's okay.
We've had Gamergate, then Me Too, and now Activision Blizzard, and a lot of these things have frustrated me all along the way, right? But the frustration that I feel now is I'm like, great Scott, we like the boulder has been rolling downhill for a number of years now, and like we just keep like shoveling more dirt and finding more poo underneath, and I'm like what does it take? Like what does it take to topple the empire, right? That clearly exists, and I don't know why no one. I mean, and what's a little sad to a certain extent is like, are you telling me that there's just no good corporate leadership, like in the whole industry? Like there's no, like coming from places where it's constantly your people are your most valuable asset. Like take care of your people. That's your number one responsibility in the day. Like it seems impossible, like that this condition would pervade an entire industry to a point where the only real change, right, is completely outside of, like, the only real change that I've seen is like the number of kind of mom and pop shop development studios that open, right, that say, we're this is our changed culture, right? This is our changed leadership structure to ensure that these types of things don't happen. But like those studios are like, there's been a couple, and they're studios of like 15 to 30 people. So I think what I'm getting around to is, right, I think too, like as much as I get frustrated with the corporate leadership, I continue to be frustrated by, quite frankly, the engineers themselves that are in this industry, right? As an engineer myself, right, I constantly get frustrated with, I'm like, look, if crunch is a problem and it's a cultural problem and you're being undervalued and asked to do more for less, like leave the industry. Like go find something else. Like companies aren't going to respond until it's really, really hard to obtain and retain talent, right? Until you force that issue and there's a mass exodus, like they're not gonna change. So I don't know. I don't get it.
Well, and I think that that's a piece of it. And I think a piece of it there too is it's not surprising that this type of culture has continued, has permeated, and has sustained itself, because when you have a workforce that is either willing to as you said, right, maintain crunch and live through it, or you have a workplace environment that chews people up and spits them back out, that there are always more, there's a surplus in the workforce, right? Like we saw this with the statements around Rockstar and Take Two, right? Like, if you don't want to work at Rockstar on a GTA game, somebody else will. So go ahead and leave, and somebody else will put in the hours to be here. That was the mind share that was kind of shared out during the postmortems around Red Dead. And so if that's why change a culture if people are never around long enough to help sustain that culture, that you are moving people through a corporate structure quick enough or within the confines enough that there's not the incentive for change because people are either leaving or being replaced.
Gotcha.
As you said, real happy notes to end the show on. So
thank goodness what we have up next week is the GX show. So let's see. So next Picks Plays assignment for people who want to be in the loop and participate and play along. A lot of dev shops and publishers. Here we go. A lot of dev shops and publishers have stumbled, misstep, or just completely lost their mojo over the last couple of years. Some of them have taken a positive step or two to right the ship. Play a game from any dev or publisher that has truly stepped to the proverbial cow patty in 2020 or 2021, beyond just a game delay or two due to the pandemic, and has shown a publicly conveyed step or effort to return to green. No one has made any choices right now.
So other than Deathloop, I'm really having a hard time thinking about this. And even Deathloop as Way of Arcane, Prey was a solid game. I just re-downloaded it because I never actually spent time with it. But it didn't sell well, but it reviewed well. I mean, but as you say, right, this is a publisher trying to get back after a number of missteps. It would be nice to have an Activision game to point to that would be a positive game after a number of missteps. I'm struggling to think of other big profile developers that have had challenges that have pushed out something that's a solid product this year.
Yeah, and so this is there's a ton of facets to this assignment, and as always, right, people should feel free to play with it as they want. So and I won't take. I won't take missteps and stumbles away entirely from Arcane because and I didn't realize this, but they were the studio that actually did what was the Wolfenstein game about the twin sisters?
Sisters? Yeah, Youngblood?
Yes, so they were actually the studio that did Youngblood. It was not Machine Games.
Yeah, so there's some stumbles there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but yeah, and so I'm gonna play. I have played some more of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War because Activision's clearly in the poo right now. And so I don't, and I feel like Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is a solid game. And whether the chicken came before the egg, however you want to look at it. And I also don't know that I don't think anybody should feel obligated to play a good game, right? In terms of like a company that put out like a bunch of bad games and then like put out a good one. It's fine if they're continuing to put out bad games. Like, so to me, anybody who was like and I mean, and unfortunately, it's kind of, I'm looking around, like you said, I'm looking around like the landscape, and there are good games coming out, but it's hard for me to think of. There used to be marquee studios, marquee developers, BioWare, Blizzard. There was another one that I've been thinking of recently that like has lost their mojo, right, and has kind of put out like an unexpectedly bad game or unexpectedly string of bad games. And I look around now and I'm like, I don't know. Like, everybody's waving the Insomniac flag right now, but I don't know. I feel like Insomniac does great work. I feel they're very much in a niche where they're doing third-person action-adventure games, and they've made great ones, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see what people choose. I mean, I think I've got some ideas, right? I mean, I think you could make the case for, and I may end up, rather than playing a game that they have done well with, maybe I come back to a game that they struggled with. You know, I'm thinking about Volition, right? Like they came off pretty high on Saints Row 3 and 4. They leaned into the comedy aspect with Agents of Mayhem that totally flopped, and now they're kind of, you know, wiping the slate clean and coming at it from Saints Row from a whole different direction. So I think there are some aspects there where there are developers who have struggled and are trying to come back and come from a different vector on it.
Yeah, you can play any Need for Speed game released in the last 5 or 6 years. That would check that box. So, at any rate, we're going to gather next week to talk about that assignment and what we played for it, as well as tons of other stuff. I think people will be veritably surprised next week with some of the things that we will be bringing to the table. Speaking of which, next week I will be hosting again. As I mentioned, it will be a GX episode. I will have Swiss Guard and Towmaster with me. Mr. DBQ here gets a week off, if he so chooses. Very frequently, hosts decide to come on the show anyway, because they have the free time and they want to participate.
It's a GX show. It's always fun to talk about what we're playing. So, who knows?
Invite, standing as always. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in tonight. Once again, I have been Game Logic. My co-host tonight has been DBQ Hams. On behalf of the E2KG Network podcasting channel, exclusively on YouTube now, I will say goodnight. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. We will see you next week. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.
Enemies close, have me thinking they're friends. 10 toes down, I'll be free until the end. Crib outside the city, I don't feel safe in my hands. Took so many years, I'm just waiting for the wins. I'm in debt to no one but the one who took my sins. I do it for real, there's no reason to pretend. If I do it once, I do it again. Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. Oh, you matter what? Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. Oh, you matter what? Add it up. Told her if it's all me, everything is on me. Gon' back it up. Matter what? Told ya I'ma do me. Why you hating on me? It's not adding up. I do roll like a Mack truck. Country heart, I'm a couple.